series Heartstrings. Please welcome our friend, the fabulous Dolly Parton.
What happens when America's sweetheart walks into a studio ready for warmth but gets cold shoulders instead? This is not about yelling or screaming. This is about staying calm, keeping your dignity, and knowing when to say enough is enough. What went down on The View that day ended with shocked silence, broken cameras, and a walkout nobody expected. This was a masterclass in grace under pressure that nobody will ever forget. The studio looked absolutely perfect that winter morning. Golden lights glowing softly everywhere. Holiday decorations carefully placed in every corner. Candles flickering behind the glass desk. Wreaths hanging beautifully on the windows. And that cozy feeling The View loved to show off during the holiday season. Everything looked safe, welcoming, and friendly. The atmosphere screamed warmth and holiday cheer. Dolly Parton noticed everything the second she walked onto that set. She wore black sequins that sparkled without being too flashy or demanding attention. Her blonde hair was styled perfectly, softer than what people usually see on stage. She waved at the crowd with that signature warmth, and that famous smile pulled instant applause from everyone in the room. The energy was electric with excitement. Joy Behar watched her closely from across the table, not smiling, not frowning, just staring with an intensity that felt calculating. Whoopi Goldberg leaned forward like she always does, taking control of the moment with her natural authority. Please welcome the one and only Dolly Parton. The cheers got even louder, filling every corner of the studio. Dolly nodded graciously. Put her hand over her heart for a second, in genuine appreciation, and sat down with her hands folded neatly on the table like the lady she is. 2 View mugs sat between her and Joy like ceramic walls in a conversation that had not even started yet. "Thank you for having me," Dolly said with that warm voice everyone recognizes instantly. "It's good to be here." Her tone was gentle, familiar, and completely disarming. You could feel the audience already loving her presence. For the first few minutes, everything went exactly as planned. Whoopi asked about Dolly's new music projects and upcoming releases. Another host brought up her incredible literacy work and the millions of lives she has touched. There was genuine laughter, deep respect, and safe topics all around. Dolly answered easily, thoughtful, but brief, never bragging about her accomplishments, never sounding rehearsed or fake. She talked about creativity with passion, giving back to communities, and how she never imagined any of this growing up dirt poor in the Tennessee mountains. Her humility was touching and real. Then Joy leaned in, and everything changed in an instant. Not loud, not aggressive, but with that obvious shift in energy that everyone could feel. Her posture tightened noticeably. Her head tilted in that particular way, signaling she was no longer listening but getting ready to attack. The temperature dropped. "So, Dolly," Joy said, her voice casual but sharp underneath like a hidden blade, "you've been doing this a long time." Dolly smiled warmly. "I have, yes," Joy nodded slowly, deliberately. "Decades, really. Different times, different crowds, different generations, and somehow you have never really changed your look at all." A pause. Not long enough to interrupt the flow, but long enough to feel completely deliberate and loaded. Dolly blinked once, still maintaining that beautiful smile. "Well," she said lightly, "I've always believed if you know who you are deep down, you don't need to chase every single trend that comes along." The audience made approving sounds, murmuring their agreement. Joy didn't smile back at all. But don't you think, she pushed harder, that there's something fake about that consistency? I mean, big hair, sparkles everywhere, the over-the-top femininity. Some people might say it's pretty outdated in today's world. The mood in the studio shifted hard and fast. Whoopi glanced sideways with concern in her eyes. One co-host shuffled her papers nervously. Dolly didn't move a muscle, didn't tense up, didn't even let that smile drop from her face. Instead, she tilted her head slightly with grace. "Well, Joy," she said gently, "I've always thought femininity wasn't something to be embarrassed about or apologize for. It's just one way of being strong in this world." Joy's lips pressed together tightly. "Sure," she said dismissively, "but don't you worry that younger women see that and think success means looking a certain way? That being taken seriously in any field requires all the glitter and glamour." The words hung there heavy in the air, not a direct insult, but definitely not a compliment either. The implication was crystal clear. Dolly's fingers rested calmly together, her perfect nails tapping once softly against the glass table. "What I think young women are smart enough to decide for themselves what empowers them," she replied with conviction, "and I trust them more than I trust labels that try to box them in." A genuine wave of applause moved through the crowd. Joy leaned back in her chair and crossed her arms defensively. "I'm just saying," she added with an edge, "you've built a brand over the years, and brands can sometimes hide the real substance underneath all the packaging. That was the exact moment. Not when the words landed, but when Dolly realized exactly how they were meant to land and cut. This was not curiosity or a real conversation meant to explore ideas. This was a slow, calculated attack disguised as intellectual discussion. The mask was slipping. Dolly looked directly at Joy for the first time with full attention, used not with anger burning in her eyes, but with total clarity and understanding. "Well," she said softly but firmly, "I think substance speaks for itself without needing anyone's permission." Her tone was still kind, still controlled, but something had definitely shifted in the energy, and Joy noticed it immediately. She smiled faintly like she had finally gotten under Dolly's skin and drawn blood. "Of course," Joy replied smugly. "I just think it's worth examining and questioning." Dolly nodded once with dignity. "Then examine away to your heart's content," she said. "I've lived my entire life in the open for everyone to see." The audience clapped again, louder this time with more passion. Joy didn't join in at all. She just adjusted her mug with deliberate movements, eyes locked on Dolly like a predator, already planning her next strategic move. And Dolly, still smiling and composed beautifully, had no clue yet that this was only the beginning of something ugly. The show tried desperately to move on like nothing happened. Someone's voice behind the scenes pushed the panel towards safer topics that wouldn't cause problems. One co-host brought up Dolly's imagination library with genuine enthusiasm, smiling with real respect and admiration. "Over 100 million books distributed," she said in complete awe. "That's not just charity. That's literally making history and changing lives." Dolly's eyes softened right away. This was her safe space, her true passion, not fame or attention, but real impact on real people's lives. "Well, honey," Dolly said with emotion, "books saved me before fame ever did anything for me. A child with a book is a child with a future full of possibilities." The audience clapped warmly with genuine appreciation. A few people even stood up in respect before sitting back down. Whoopi nodded, clearly pleased with the direction. "That's what we love about you. You've always been about lifting people up instead of tearing them down. Joy's mouth twitched at that comment, just slightly, like someone hearing praise they didn't think was fully deserved or warranted. For a brief moment, the studio felt normal again. Holiday candles glowed peacefully. Cameras moved smoothly between faces. Mugs sat perfectly aligned like props in a pleasant scene. Then Joy slid her mug forward a few inches, and the scraping sound was quiet, but sharp enough to cut through the peace. "So, Dolly," she said. Just 2 words, but with a brand new tone dripping with intention. "Let me ask you something real." The co-host beside her blinked like she was bracing for impact. Dolly turned toward Joy with that same polite openness she gave everyone, from strangers to presidents. "Yes, ma'am," she said respectfully. Joy smiled, but it was the kind of smile that measures and judges you instead of welcoming you in. "Do you ever worry that your charity work, all your goodness and generosity, is just part of the brand too? Just another marketing tool?" A hush dropped across the entire table, not because it was the hardest question ever asked, but because it sounded exactly like a trap, dressed up as smart, intellectual conversation. The accusation was thinly veiled. Dolly's smile stayed on her face for a beat longer than needed. "Joy," she said gently, but with steel underneath, "I don't do what I do to look good in anyone's eyes. I do it because I remember exactly what it felt like not to have anything." Joy nodded, like she expected exactly that answer. "Sure, but you can't deny," Joy pressed harder, "that charity is incredibly convenient, especially for celebrities. It creates a perfect shield from criticism. When someone criticizes the image, the fans immediately say, 'Oh, but she gives away books, so leave her alone.'" The audience murmured uncomfortably. You could feel people physically shifting in their seats, wanting desperately to protect Dolly from what was being suggested. The atmosphere was getting tense. Dolly's eyes narrowed just barely, like a curtain moving slightly in the wind. "Well," Dolly replied, still maintaining her calm, "and if my work helps people in real ways, then I don't mind if it helps my image too. But it wasn't built for that purpose." Joy leaned in closer, clearly thrilled that the studio was holding its collective breath. "Okay, but let's be completely honest here," she said, voice getting sharper by the second. "Your whole thing, sweet Dolly, kind Dolly, harmless Dolly, it's all a performance, isn't it? It's calculated." Whoopi inhaled sharply like she wanted to jump in and stop this, then stopped herself. Sometimes you have to let someone show exactly who they really are. Dolly didn't even flinch. Instead, she gave Joy a small, thoughtful nod, the way you nod at someone you're choosing not to embarrass publicly. "Honey," Dolly said calmly, "everything we do in public is a performance to some degree. Yours, too." A few laughs bubbled up from the audience, nervous and surprised. It was not a jab or an insult, just a simple fact, delivered so softly it was impossible to argue with. Joy's eyes went hard as stones. "No," she said sharply, "mine is honest conversation. Yours is an act. You giggle, flutter your eyelashes, play the cute country doll, and somehow people treat you like you're a saint who can do no wrong." Dolly's fingers folded tighter together, her bright, perfectly manicured nails pressed gently into her own skin. She kept her voice low and steady despite the provocation. "Joy, I've been called a lot of things in my life. Doll isn't even close to the worst." Joy scoffed loudly. "You're avoiding the point entirely." "I'm addressing it directly," Dolly answered firmly. Maybe just not the way you hoped I would." That line hit like glass clinking sharply. The co-hosts shifted again uncomfortably. One looked down at her cards like they suddenly became the most fascinating thing she had ever seen. Joy kept pushing forward, sensing she was close to creating a viral moment. Here's the actual point. You present yourself as this big symbol of empowerment for women, but your entire image is built around exactly what men wanted women to look like for decades. Big hair, tiny waist, loud sparkle everywhere. It's not exactly forward-thinking or progressive. There it was, completely out in the open. Not curiosity anymore, just pure judgment and condescension. Dolly blinked slowly and deliberately. When she spoke, her voice was still sweet, but no longer soft or gentle. "Joy," she said with conviction. "What? I didn't build myself to please men or anyone else. I built myself to survive in a world that didn't want me to succeed." Her words were simple, but they carried something way heavier than sequins or rhinestones ever could. This was real. Joy opened her mouth wide, ready to attack again, but Dolly held up one finger, polite, calm, but absolutely firm. "And before you decide what kind of woman I am," Dolly continued with quiet power, "you might want to ask yourself something important." Joy's face tightened visibly. "What?" Dolly's smile came back, but it looked completely different now. It was not warmth anymore. It was pure composure and control. "When you look at me," Dolly asked quietly but pointedly, "do you see a woman who chose her own life and path? Or do you only see what you've been taught to resent and tear down?" The studio went completely still and silent. It was not a mic drop moment yet. It was actually worse for Joy. It was a mirror being held directly up to her face, forcing her to see herself. Joy's lips parted in shock. She tried to laugh it off dismissively, but the laugh sounded weak and completely forced. It died quickly. "Oh, please," she snapped defensively. "Resent? I'm just tired of watching grown women play dress-up and calling it empowerment like it means something." The audience gasped collectively. The holiday set suddenly felt like a stage for something much darker and more intense. Dolly's eyes moved from Joy's face to the camera, then back with purpose. And for the first time, you could see it clearly written all over her face. Thus, Dolly was not trying to win some argument. She was trying desperately not to lose her cool completely. "Joy," she said, voice still even and measured, "I've never once asked you to like my hair or approve of my style." Joy shrugged dismissively. "Well, it's pretty hard not to notice it." Dolly nodded slowly and deliberately. "And I've never asked you to approve of my personal choices," she added with dignity. Joy leaned back, looking smug again and satisfied. "Then why are you being so defensive about everything?" Dolly paused intentionally. The silence was long enough to make everyone in that room swallow hard. "Because you're not discussing my choices honestly," Dolly said clearly. "You're mocking them and trying to humiliate me." Joy's face went bright red. "That's completely ridiculous." "Is it really?" Dolly asked. "On still quiet but powerful. Or is that just what bullies say when they finally get called out for their behavior?" The word bullies rolled through the room like actual thunder. Whoopi's eyes went wide with shock. One co-host actually froze completely mid-movement. Joy's whole body stiffened defensively, her tone turning razor-sharp and dangerous. "Don't you dare call me a bully," she hissed through clenched teeth. "I'm asking legitimate questions." Dolly's voice did not rise even 1 decibel. "That's the thing, Joy," Dolly replied with precision. "Real questions are meant to understand and learn. Yours are specifically meant to hurt and embarrass." Joy's smile disappeared completely from her face. For a quick moment, you could see the calculations happening in her brain. Push harder, break her down, get the viral clip everyone will share. And she absolutely did. Well then, Joy said aggressively, leaning forward hard across the table, let's cut straight to the truth here. You're not the saint people think you are. You're a savvy businesswoman who sold a fantasy to millions, and you sold it so well, people forgot to ask who you really are underneath it all. The air got thick and heavy. Even the audience, usually ready to react to everything, went dead silent. They could sense something sacred had just been crossed. Dolly did not move a muscle, but her hands slowly unlinked. Her shoulders lifted slightly, then settled carefully, like someone getting ready for battle without wanting it to show. Her smile faded to something neutral and controlled. And when she finally spoke, her voice was calm enough to be genuinely scarier than any yelling could ever be. "Joy," she said softly but with authority, "you keep talking like you actually know me as a person." Joy's eyes narrowed into slits. "I know what you choose to show the world," Dolly nodded once with understanding. "And you keep pushing and prodding," she continued steadily, "like you're desperately hoping I'll finally snap and lose control so you can feel justified and right." Joy scoffed loudly. "That's absolutely ridiculous." Dolly leaned in, not aggressive, not theatrical, just enough to close the physical gap between them. "No, honey," she said with certainty. "That's exactly what this entire thing is really about." The studio held its collective breath, because Dolly Parton, America's beloved sweetheart, had completely stopped being sweet. And Joy Behar just realized with horror that she might have pushed the one person in that room who did not need to raise her voice even once to completely win. Joy opened her mouth wide to fire back, but Dolly spoke first with authority. "One more question from you like that," Dolly said, still quiet, but deadly serious, "and we're going to have a very different kind of conversation." Joy blinked rapidly. For the first time all day, she had absolutely no comeback ready, but she was not the type to back down or retreat. She just smiled, thin, sharp, and genuinely dangerous. "Good," Joy said coldly, "because I'm not done with you yet." And the way she said those words made the producers behind the cameras frantically grab their headsets. Everyone in that building knew now. This was not an interview anymore. Hannah, this was a full-on collision about to explode in spectacular fashion. The end was coming fast.